Welcome back to the Barstool Baseball Show. This is the Wednesday National League show. Carl here in Omaha and my guy Clemmer in New York. Clemmer, you are to dinner tonight wearing your collared shirt. You look great. Dinner review, quick.
Yeah, we went to a place called Bad Roman. I guess it's like super trendy place here in New York. My wife picked it out. No. It's a C-. She liked it. They have like a fancy dessert or they have fancy stuff and there's like it's like I walked in. I'm like I'm 20 years like too old for this place. Probably it's not. If you're a middle-aged guy, not a spot for you. Probably I don't know. The food was fine. It was fine. It was just it's like she got the reservation like a month ago. It's like impossible to get reservations. Like and we got them on a Tuesday. It's like this is what the hype's about.
So were you going in, at least be honest, like, were you excited for this dinner? Did you do any research or were you kind of at this point, show it to me?
I didn't do any, like, it's cool. I mean, the great thing about living in New York is we have a million great restaurants. So, like, my wife and I like to go and try different places. So, this is a place she was really excited about. I think she enjoyed it. She probably give it like a B. I don't want to speak for her, but she enjoyed it more than I did. But I even think she wasn't blown away by it. It was fun.
While we're talking just nice dinners, like, I'm thinking of times within the last calendar year, I've had a couple of phenomenal culinary experiences. And one that kind of jumps out to my mind would be when I was down in Arizona, and it wasn't a restaurant, it was a cocktail lounge, and it was in a rail car, and they'd simulated that this rail car was moving. And when you went into this rail car, you had to buy tickets to go into the bar. And they change it out every 90 minutes, and they treat it like it's like a 1920s train car. That was like a really unique experience. I think we ended up paying awesome. a couple $100 in cocktails, which is like a stupid thing to say out loud. But the experience that you get, I think at some point when you spend so much money or you put time into something, like, I want to have an experience that I feel I can take home and be like, man, I'll never find that anywhere else. Can I ask, for this place that you went tonight, was there anything like unique about the experience that they were trying to push on you guys? Like, it's really dark, or like we get our, the custom fabric is from, fucking Turkey, and, the owner's fifth generation. Like, was there anything weird they were pushing on you guys, or was it just like a New York restaurant?
It was like a New York. It had like some like aesthetics of like snakes or something on the wall, or it wasn't for me. It was fine. I think it was like this whole stick was like, hey, we're New York trendy, and like if you're in your like mid to late 20s, early 30s, you probably think it's a fun place to go. I guess I don't know. The menu was fine. The food was fine. It was just And the thing that sucks about New York restaurants, they pack you in like sardines, so you don't have a lot of room. I never feel like it's like super. I'm never super comfortable unless I'm at like a Peter Luger's, where like you have like a chair, you have your table. It's more. I feel like with this place, it's much more like. And even, I'm so skinny, even I'm feeling. I'm.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a skip for me. Bad Roman, C-.
Did they have any marlin on the menu? How about that?
Didn't see any, but we're gonna have some on our menu, aren't we, Carl? What a segue!
Boys, we're serving up something great here. This is the Barstool Baseball Wednesday National League show. Obviously, you've been tuned in here once or twice before. You know what we're going to do. Clemmer and I went real deep on the Diamondbacks last week. Not even like that intentionally. We just wanted to talk about the Diamondbacks. They're hot, and we got deep onto them. So if you're interested in what we think makes the Diamondbacks a very interesting team, we did that last week. This week, you and I were talking, and it doesn't seem like the Marlins are slowing down. I know they dropped that series of the Mariners. They turned around, they swept the Nationals. They're playing well now. It's a very interesting team. There's a couple other things going on. We spend a lot of time in the National League East historically with this show, with programming, with Barstool Baseball. So we're comfortable talking a lot about the Marlins. We'll touch a little bit about the West later. There's some central stories we're interested in. But honestly, like, when we look at the standings, we come into the power rankings, I think the most surprising thing is we see the Marlins at 6 and confidently. So I would generally say, as I look at this team, like the pitching staff, very powerful, still underachieving with room to grow. It's just a really interesting team, and I think if the Mets are not going to be competitive, no offense right now, and I think if the Phillies took time to get going, like the Marlins seized their opportunity to be 42 and 30 something in this window, and they still have room to get better. That I really do think that. Now, am I crazy to think that, or do you look at them as they've kind of peaked, or do you think they do have room to get better?
I think it's somewhere in the middle. So they're 42 and 32. They just lost tonight. We're taping this late on Tuesday night. But they are still the leader in the wild card chase, right? So they're number one wild card team. They're a game ahead of the Giants. Look at the standings right now. They're 2 ahead of the Dodgers. If you had told me the Marlins would be 2 ahead of the Dodgers as we head to the mid-season mark, I would have thought you were an insane person. And they're, 3.5 ahead of the Phillies, who are right now on the outside looking in. So they're definitely in a good position. Now, in some ways, have they peaked? Sure. Like, is Louis Arise going to bat 400 all year? I don't think so. I mean, he also had 2 5-8 games last week, so I would say if anyone is going to hit 400 in the National League, it's going to be him. But if you look at their starting staff, you said they're underwhelming. I think you're right. So they're underwhelming in a couple different ways. They're underwhelming in production, and they're underwhelming in injuries. And there's a way that they can really improve just by time. 2 of those injured guys are coming back in the next couple of weeks. They're both in rehab assignments. That's Johnny Cueto and Trevor Rogers. They're both in the minor leagues right now in rehab assignments. Cueto, I think, pitched a AAA game. So you might see these guys, both those guys should be in the rotation or on the staff by the All-Star break. That's a pretty big upgrade for this team. And then I know Edward Cabrera's in the DL right now, or the IL, excuse me. But that's a short-term thing. He's going to be back in 15 days for sure. So it was, I think, almost done as kind of innings limit type of thing. Also, I think it was like a small nagging thing, just let him work it out. And then all of that, Yuri Perez. They got him, they didn't have him at all in April. They got him, and he pitched today. His ERA right now, 1.54. He's 20 years old.
Oh, so his ERA, because I have it at 1.8, so he's down to 1.54, and I think it would be a good starting point with the Marlins is to kind of talk about the starting staff. And we can talk about the pitching staff as a whole, but let's just hone in on the starting staff, because everybody knows Sandy Alcantara, from Cy Young last year, very dominant guy, goes deep into games, and his ERA is just a tick under 5 at this point. And a lot of that is just the walks and the home runs combined and the extra base hits. Some of that's bad timing. Now, his ERA plus isn't great. His FIP's under 4. When you find a huge difference between ERA and FIP, you can feel pretty confident that the results are, maybe not entirely matched with performance. He's got an entire gear to get to. Still, I think on paper, he'd be considered the one. Yuri Perez, who you bring up, the 20-year-old rookie, is just utterly sensational. He looks like Giannis. I've said this before. He looks like somebody who, 5 years from now, we're still going to be saying, he's got another gear to get to. Every time he takes the mound, he's probably going to get better. And when you talk about those 2 guys at the top, the rest of the pitchers within this pitching staff, dominant strikeout stuff. That's really where they stand out. They're first in strikeouts in the National League. A lot of other categories are kind of mid-tier, which is interesting to me because it's if they can be this good with the strikeout, but they're still mid-tier with hits given up, still mid-tier with walks allowed. I just see potential. I just see because I know people are, I guess my general starting point when I think about the Marlins is I think nationally people are oh, they're going to get worse. They're just hot right now. But I actually think it's the other way where they're actually getting wins they shouldn't really have. And their normalization is actually playing better baseball and these pitchers getting better.
I think there's 2 ways to look at it. So one way of looking at it is they won a ton of one-run games. They've given up more runs than they've scored. That's never a good trend. You don't want to keep that up. So I guess the large picture, their Pythagorean win-loss, I'm practicing that word as well. They're 35-38 before today, and they lost today 2-0.
I'm sorry I have to do this to you. A tip for that word.
Yeah.
Say it like I would say it. Pythagorean. It's a Chicago word. Pythagorean.
Pythagorean.
There you go. It's a Pythagorean.
I'll say that in front of a mirror for an hour. That will make the neighbors not think I'm an insane person. Pythagorean. Whatever you want to call it. The Marlins aren't good at it. So that's an issue for them as far as the scoring and as far as what maybe people perception might be. But like you said, if you look a little deeper, especially with the rotation, you do see a lot of areas for improvement. You mentioned Alcantara. He's having a miserable season. And it's a huge step back for a guy that is a Cy Young contender. Someone I expected to have a monster year this year. You look at his track record, especially in 2021, 2022, just amazing. Right? And he kept getting better. And then this year he's regressed. He's only 27. I don't believe that he's this bad. And like you said, the FIP is telling us differently. Yuri Perez, I just want to do a quick talk about him for a second. He pitched today through 6 shutout innings, 3 hits, 9 Ks, no walks. He's 20 years old. His ERA is 1.54. There's another 20-year-old that pitched in 1985. It was for a full season. His ERA was 1.53, and his name is Dwight Gooden.
Let's
How about
go.
that?
If you're watching this on YouTube right now, because I don't want to ruin this podcast feed experience for you guys listening, I am freaking out in my hotel room right now because this is why you go to Clemmer 37 years ago. And Doc was so impactful. And that's what when I look at the Marlins offensive numbers, sure, Arise has carried most of these guys. If you take Arise out or you just even say he's very good and not exceptional as a hitter, their average is 10th in the National League instead of 7th. Their hits is
it really
8th
drops. Yeah.
I mean, he really carries the cumulative.
Him and Jorge Soler. I want to give Soler credit there too. Those two guys.
Can you go back to that? Can you go back to Doc Gooden then? And let's just use this as an example. Could you look at that team and say, like, did he, in what ways did he boost that team other than obviously when he went out, he dominated guys? Was he a persona that lifted guys? Was it something where it was like, oh, fuck, he's out here dominating people, so that kind of brings the rest of the guys up? Or what was that like?
Yeah, so from 1977 through 1983, the Mets had a losing record every year. They were terrible. Now, 83, they traded for Keith Hernandez halfway through the year. They had Darryl Strawberry the entire year. 1984, they won 90 games. And the reason was they called up this 19-year-old named Dwight Gooden. And he went out and was a very good pitcher that year, 17-9, 260 ERA. 85 is when he leveled up and just had one of the greatest pitching seasons of all time. He went 24-4, 153 ERA. Just insane season. He was 20. So, I mean, to compare Perez and Gooden isn't really fair to either guy because Gooden was in his second year so dominant. But I just wanted to explain just like how incredible what Perez is doing here. They have the same ERA. Now, I know Perez has made 9 starts. Dwight Gooden that year made, I'm looking at it right now, 35 starts, 16 complete games. Incredible. So it's not entirely fair comp, but it's something to look at, and it's something to show how one dominant pitcher, one ace, can make a huge difference, especially if he's coming up from within the system. You're not spending a lot of money on him. He's coming up through your system. He's cheap. You bring him up. Dwight Gooden, and then also eventually Ron Darling and Sid Fernandez changed that Mets team, made them instantly contenders. Yuri Perez joins the Marlins, and they're instantly the best wild card team in the National League. That can't be a coincidence.
Now, how much do you think Sandy Alcantara is weighed down by his success now?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what goes on in his psyche. I will say though, it's not like he's having a weaker year than last year. But he's having a bad year. So it's not even high expectations. He's just not good this year. Now, I do think that the good news is he's healthy, seemingly. There are a number of analytic numbers that you can look at that say this will pass. Is he going to have an ERA under 3 this year? No, it's almost impossible now. But could he get that ERA maybe in the high 3s, ends up with a 3.8? And if that's the case, that means he's pitching really well that second half. And that's almost, imagine if he pitches like he can, and you have 2 aces. You got Perez and Alcantara. It's not that crazy to think about. And then on top of that, you mix in a guy like Jesus Luzardo, who's having a decent year. Braxton Garrett, who's the guy we thought we saw a couple years ago. You mixed in Edward Cabrera, you mixed in Trevor Rogers, and then Johnny Cueto. All of a sudden, you have all this depth in the starting rotation, and at teams like the Dodgers, other teams that are contending don't have. The Yankees don't have. Some of these big market teams don't have all this depth. Even my Mets are starting, Tyler McGill because we don't have any other options. So, the Marlins might have one of the lowest payrolls, but oddly enough, some of the best starting rotation depth.
Yeah, the rotation, and when you bring up Luzardo, power stuff. I mean, a lot of these guys are striking out 12, 13 per 9 innings, which, with the pitch clock era, no shift, this stuff becomes significantly more important when you can rack up strikeouts per 9 innings. There's other teams that have tried to pitch to contact. If I go back to Sandy for a second, I bring up the psyche, and maybe I don't want to get too deep into this, but one of 11 kids, Dominican, was an all-star in 2019, which had taken some time. I mean, he got acquired by the Cardinals originally and then was traded.
Right.
And had gotten into the big leagues and was serviceable, was good. Was definitely it's not surprising to people that had followed him in his youth after he had gotten acquired by the Marlins that he's become as good as he is. But when he made the All-Star team in 2019, he also led the National League in losses.
Hmm.
And then you go back into the pandemic season and you're kind of caught up a little bit. And then in 2021, he signs a contract extension for 4 years and $56 million, which is probably like, for Sandy Alcantara, you made it, dude. Like, you're a huge deal. You're there. You're settled. You got paid. He still really hasn't hit this global spotlight, though, in the game. So he goes out in the 2022 season, and it can't be overstated how spectacular it was to see him pitch deep into games last year when it was clear that that is something that has been abandoned by the modern game. And so Sandy really won us over with that. And then to win the Cy Young Award, I would imagine going into the World Baseball Classic, there has to be, if we can sit here and say the Phillies had a World Series hangover, if the Cubs in 2017 had a World Series hangover, I don't think it's unfair to look at a player and say, it's fine if Sandy wants to have a hangover and pitch at a. I mean, if I'm a Marlins fan, you're disappointed. But as a baseball fan and a purist, I don't think it's wrong to look at a guy like that and consider his history and say, all right, fine, maybe he's a little slow in the first half of 2023. And then if we really want to pin it down, the Marlins like made pick Yuri Perez up from the airport. And I don't want to say they made him, but he's part of it more than just making your start every fifth day now. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes with that where this goes back to your point. I think it's going to be very easy to see that switch flip. 7 innings, 1 hit, 10
I hope
strikeouts
so,
back in
because
command.
no, his ERA's jumped 2.7 runs this year. Like that's
But
not.
the hits are under. The hits are under. The strikeouts are over. His peripherals, his basic peripherals are okay. I think.
Yeah, I mean the whips jumped up a little bit, not insane amount, but the hits per 9 innings, either the numbers are going up. They're not trending the right way, but they're not. You're right. It's not like disaster zone. You're like, oh my god, it's like Lance Lynn before the 15 strikeout, 16 strikeout game. It's like, what is this guy? What's happening here? It's not like that. It's not Jordan Lyles. We're not in that territory. But with Alcantara though, it's just like I don't know. You want him to get better soon, especially when this team is in the playoff hunt, which they are. They're a very legitimate playoff team right now. He needs to improve. I did want to mention one thing about Luzardo real quick.
Sure. Oh, we have plenty of time for Luzardo and the rest of the staff. I just
Good.
wanted to make those points about Sandy because in the last thing was that like he could have been way better than he is last year, and he could be way worse than he is this year. And then that's the spread where like maybe he's
Right.
a little worse than he was last year, and he's much better than he is this year. And we're living through it because he's a great player, and it's kind of fun to like break him down like this because we know, you and I know, people listening to us know, Sandy can go out and give you the two best months in a row that like any pitcher on the planet has. And
Absolutely.
so it's kind of cool to see like when is it going to come back? He's 27, he's not hurt. It's an
Right.
interesting team and all that stuff. So take him out though, even though he's been bad. The Marlins are 42 and 30, whatever. And I think a better point would be, could you imagine him being as bad as he has and the Marlins have been as good as they are? And
No.
that would go back to the Luzardo and the Braxtons and the guys that are able to that can go out. The ERAs aren't great, but they can dominate lineups, and I think that's what you see is like, sure, maybe they have a not so quality spark that they can go out and just dominate you.
They're consistent. They give you innings. See everything you want. Luzardo, we mentioned how Alcantara came from a trade from the Cardinals. Luzardo was on the A's, and they traded him stupidly for Starling Marte. And as kind of let's try to make the playoffs one last time. They didn't make the playoffs that year, so they get Marte, and for nothing. The A's don't use Marte at all. Effectively, it's kind of like when the Mets traded for Javier Baez. They gave away this great prospect, Pete Crow Armstrong. Now you have him in the Cubs. We didn't make the playoffs that year. Like what a wasted trade. It's similar with Luzardo, who now is a very competent pitcher for the Marlins. He's only 25. He's everything you'd want in a young pitcher if you're a Major League Baseball team. Every single team, all 30, could use a Jesus Luzardo. He's not going to be erased, but who doesn't need a good third or fourth starter? That's 25. And and you got him for a veteran outfielder that you didn't even need.
And a great body, like he's got that sturdy lefty body on him. So he's about 6'2", 220. He's been in the big leagues since he's 21 years old.
Yeah, they rushed him. The A's rushed him.
Sure.
He had no business being in the majors his first 2 seasons.
Okay. I do need to make, here's just like a sidebar because, I don't like to shit on players because it's a hard game. And I know when guys do bad and all that stuff. And so one thing I love about talking baseball with you, Clemmer, is like, I will shit on a front office till I die. I'll shit on ownership. I'll shit on a leadership, all that stuff. Like when you get a 28-year-old who's been hurt and should be in AAA and like
Yeah.
maybe he's overplayed a little bit. You try to be fair about these players. There's been tens of thousands that have played Major League Baseball, another tens upon tens of thousands that have fucking cut their left arm off for one plate appearance. I try not to shit on players. God, I love that you just instantly. Yeah, Oakland rushed him. Of course they fucking rushed him, so they could probably trade him right away. So they could say, "Look at this 21-year-old." That's exactly what they
And
did.
it's bullshit. And that's on Oakland. So, like, I give Luzardo a ton of credit. Imagine being 23. You end up with a 6.61 ERA for the year. You got traded half of the year. You're bad for both teams. You have to have a real mental toughness to then be like, all right, I'm not going to let that getting booed or being terrible or getting traded, I'm not going to let that bring me down. I'm going to work hard and come back the next year and be a very good pitcher instantly because he figured it out, worked it out. When you rush guys up, some guys can handle it. Greg Maddux was horrible when he got called up. He was terrible for like a year and a half for the Cubs. He had the mental strength to be able to overcome that. Some guys you see don't. And, you wonder, like, what are you doing? I remember the Red Sox brought up a kid named Abe Alvarez, 2004. And they rushed him up. And was he ever going to be a major league player? I don't know, but he was a top prospect for them pitching wise, and he never figured it out because he was getting just hammered in the majors. That could ruin a career. I give Luzardo a ton of credit for being able to overcome that, and that's the A's did him dirty, and they teams, if anything, I feel like we were now in the majors with arbitration clock, everything else. Maybe teams wait too long to bring guys up, but I almost wonder if that's. I don't want to see guys lose out on money, but if that's better for the game and better for everybody's psyche, if they're a bit more patient with some of these guys. Or when your guy's ready. The Marlins knew Yuri Perez was ready. They bring him up, and sure enough, he's ready. But, bad job, Oakland, again, as always.
I think baseball's in a much better spot with bringing guys up than they were even just like 5-10 years ago. And then if you go back 30 years ago or whatever, like baseball's in a good spot. They're getting better at that. A lot of that's tied to the minor leagues and the relationship with the development of sending guys on buses and being able to monitor them and scout them. And so I understand baseball is very much trying to centralize the development process, trying to partner up better with the NCAA. It's still really hard to find out like good players because they slip through the cracks. They end up at JUCOs, it's a really hard thing to identify great baseball players at the major league level early on. But Major League Baseball has gone out of their way to do it. It's become more of a standardized, streamlined process. And I think it's only going to get better. And I think you see the hit rate. Like, I make fun of the 2020 draft a lot because the 2020 draft, they had no idea what was going on with COVID. It's just a shit draft. But if you look at the 19 draft, it'll blow your tits off your chest how some of those guys have panned out so far and some of the promise in those careers. And I think that's closer to what we're looking at.
I think you're right, too. Like, look at some of the talent we have, right? Like, coming up, like Gunnar Henderson's figuring it out. Adley, the year before that, instantly made Baltimore a good team. We mentioned Yuri Perez. Look at the Reds with Ellie De La Cruz, Spencer Steer, McClain for them. Yep. The Pirates just called up Henry Davis. Maybe that will work. But you feel like he's ready. If you look at Henry Davis's numbers, you're like, all right, they're not rushing this guy. This guy appears ready. Look at how much impact some of these young players are having. Corbin Carroll, probably the best example. You go through almost every team that's in contention right now has a young player kind of running this, and that is awesome to watch. It's exciting to watch. And you're right. I think it has to do with maybe the CBA and some of the rules they put in where they're not holding guys back. Like the Cubs, you guys held back. It was Rizzo, right?
Yeah, it was Chris Bryant in 2015, and then he never forgave him for it, and I don't blame him. It was
neither do I. He goes,
yeah, great way to learn baseball as a business before you even take a plate appearance. Like, this is off record. I mean, like, now we're on record, but I know for a fact, we've talked, and he's just like how you get in the box and you're already an object. Like, it's tough to come back from, and then they tell you, hey, we really care about you. We hope you're having a good experience. You're like, I was one of the best players in this organization. You guys made me go to Iowa because I wasn't, and you told me I wasn't good enough to play in the big leagues. And then I'm like the unanimous rookie of the year. There's a disconnect there. If you guys have a great scouting department, I was ready on day one.
And what if this guy, I don't think Chris Bryant's going to be a Hall of Famer, but there was a time when he could have been. And what if those, he probably should have been called up the year before. What if those 3 or 4 months he missed out cost him 3,000 hits? What if he's Fred McGriff? He ends up at 493 and he misses. I know it's kind of crazy projection, but if your guy's ready to be in the major leagues, as someone who wants to buy a ticket to a major league game, I'm expecting to see the best. And that doesn't mean you hold a guy in Iowa for a month just for some random clock that was negotiated 20 years ago in a CBA. Like, that's not right. And I think they've done a much better job, and I think we're finally seeing some dividends from that. And this is why this is one of the most exciting baseball years I can remember in a while, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think this year's been thrilling.
I think this year's been outstanding. And honestly, I think baseball needed it. Last year's, and I was so bummed with last year, and I think a lot of people are so disappointed with, the CBA, and I think people have just been. And if you can go back, basically, and I sound like a homer now as a Cubs fan, but like when the Cubs won the World Series is just outstanding. It was wonderful. It was so wonderful for baseball. Brought in such a national outsider perspective. The guys like you and me, but they'll sit here and talk about baseball till they're blue in the fucking face. Cubs win the World Series, people just flock to it. And then you just start peeling it back, man. That Astros scandal, and then people start shitting on Rob Manfred. The A's for sale, the way they handled COVID. There's so much stuff here where like baseball really, really dropped the ball in so many respects. And so this season's been, man, I really love the Diamondbacks. I love the Orioles are better than they were last year. Man, that would have sucked if the Orioles took a step back. I'd love that the Rays are like, you know what? Maybe I doubted the Rays going into this year and was like, you know what? No, we're dead wrong. And now you're an idiot going into preseason if you're going to talk shit about the Rays. And the fact that we're even sitting here talking about the Marlins and the other two teams on the list was like, well, if we get a chance to get to the Reds, we'll talk about the Reds are surprising. The Cubs are playing well. And another team was like, well, the Padres have been so utterly disappointing. I mean, these narratives prove to me just how special this game is because you can't do this in the NBA. You'll never do this in the NFL at such a scale. You'll never be this deep into an NFL season with this level of surprise across the board of like, wow, some of these guys are so bad and some of these guys are so good.
We haven't even mentioned Shohei Ohtani. Like, you have a guy like Shohei Ohtani out there that's doing stuff that's never happened. People say Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth was a pitcher, then a hitter. He wasn't both. This is crazy. And not only that, but they're in the playoff hunt. They were 5 out of the West, and they're in the wild card. The season ended today. They would be in the playoffs. This is awesome. I said my team stinks. I'm bummed out about it. Lost again tonight. But this is a really fun Major League Baseball season. I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
And I think, and I will stand by this. At going to games, I wish the pitch clock didn't exist so we could keep score better. I know that helps me.
Well, I'm not as careful as you. I love a pitch clock. By the way, another thing, I'm loving this. These games are 3 hours. I like to stay up late. I like to watch all the games. Like, this is healthier for my health. Like, I feel my well-being. Like, I'm going to bed at 1 instead of 2. And like every night like that, some nights I'm like, oh man, I'm fucking, game goes extra innings. You're like, fuck, I'm gonna be up to like 2:30. No, this is great. I'm going to bed at a normal time. I'm more of an adult. This is good.
Be serious. Be serious with me now. How serious have you considered living in a Western time zone to better consume the New York Mets?
No, see, I don't like that because I miss out. I don't like, so like the average work day is like 9 to 5, right? Like, so like games start at 4 if you're on the West Coast. I miss so much. I like this because I'm a night owl anyway. So like, all right, I come home, throw in the Mets, and then usually, I'll do stuff, clean whatever. And then like 11:30, I can watch the end of the West Coast games. And it's like, all right, this is great. I feel like there's just always baseball on at home. I love East Coast living. I'm also, that's where I was born too, is what I know. And I don't know. I would never have it any other way. I like staying up late.
So you're not moving to the Chicago office, Clever.
That's right. Staying right here in New York. New York, I was born here. I mean, I love New York. Like, this is, Yeah. I love the East Coast.
Let me go back to Luzardo for a second, just quick, because I want to tie this out. If people haven't checked him out, one of the hardest throwing starters in baseball. Now, he's from the left side, and he's 6 feet tall. But his average fastball is 97 miles an hour. He's in the top, 8 percentile of four-seam fastball velocity. I bring this up because in October, that shit plays so hard. And this is a name people are not talking about. It's not on your radar, saying he's not pitching well. And when you think about the Marlins, and they're going to get into that, if they get into an NLDS and they do the Fox graphic of the fireballers and all that shit, Luzardo is going to be that name that people are like, and here's Luzardo. He's taking the right steps this year. That can really do damage in October where you come back and you're like, who the fuck was that guy? His name's His name's Jesus Luzardo.
Yeah, and like it's a great point. Like look at his so he if you combine the last 2 seasons, he's made 33 starts. There are 184 innings. He has 214 strikeouts. So his K rate's over, 10 runs, 10 strikeouts for 9 innings. He's their third or fourth start. Like that's exactly what you want. So like he's a perfect piece for this team being in the playoffs contention at least.
Who would you trade for if you were Kim Ing? Is it
And
Ing? Okay.
and
Actually, let's just back up for a second and talk about her. She's the
yes.
only female general manager in any 4 major sports. The first one, I should say. She's the first Asian general manager in Major League Baseball.
As far as I know, and this isn't a token hire.
Like there's a list of all.
Forever.
She's a first of first. She's like
Yes.
she's a trailblazer. She's a badass.
Yeah.
Her background is born in Indianapolis, raised in New York, went to the University of Chicago, played softball there, and was just like a standout. And I guess she got into baseball. Her dad made her play stickball in Queens with the boys or something. So she's just like a tough chick. And University of Chicago, and then gets out of there and right into Major League Baseball front offices. All she wanted to do was be a general manager. She was at the Yankees when they won a bunch of championships, got hired by the Dodgers 2002 to 2011, and then over to the Marlins, and they promoted her in 2020 as a general manager. And so I just wanted to give some background on who she is, because I think she's like a super underrated, and obviously all the stuff she's doing with the Marlins is the trade with Pablo. I mean, how about that right there?
Yeah, I mean it's a great one. I mean it's huge. To Kim Ang though, like she really was like Cashman's protege, because Cashman was so young when he was GM, and she was kind of his right hand woman for a long time there until she went to the Dodgers. But she's learned from a lot of different places. She has tons of contacts in baseball. Not every deal has worked out that she's made. Not every free agent deal has worked out. The Avisale Garcia deal has been a disaster. So there's been some mistakes there, but she's done a really good job of keeping there. She hasn't made any panic deals. She's kept that rotation intact. I think she understands how important good pitching is. And you mentioned like which trade, kind of where do you look at to improve this team?
Yeah. If you're Kim. So like here comes trade deadline. I mean, we've talked so much about the pitching staff. I'd be surprised if we went pitching staff. But if you're Kim in a trade deadline, what are you thinking?
Yeah, you got to look. So a great trade she made to shore up that bullpen was getting AJ Puck. It was before this season. Another deal with Oakland. That's not a coincidence. She gave them JJ Baudet, who's been kind of this prospect, the outfield prospect they've been kind of kicking around. He's been okay with Oakland. He probably needed to change the scenery. But AJ Puck has turned into their closer. He's been awesome for them. He's kind of locked down that bullpen. So I would really focus, no surprise here with the Marlins and their history, but you got to focus on the offense. They went and got Yuri Gurriel. He's a free agent, kind of bargain for them. He's been okay at first base. Solaire's great at DH, so you can't really do anything from the DH standpoint. So Jazz Chisholm's been hurt a lot of the year. He hasn't been great. You got to kind of hope that he can figure it out. So I would look maybe at that outfield depth area. De La Cruz, Jesus Sanchez, they've both been okay this year. Chansey's been good. Maybe you could kind of work some stuff there, or maybe you make that deal for a big first baseman. I don't know what their budget constraints are, right? That's why Derek Jeter left. Derek Jeter left. There's rumors that the payroll would constantly shift. No one really knew how much money they have to spend. When I was a Mets fan, you heard this a lot with the Wilpons. They would constantly keep changing you have $90 million player. Nope, you have an $80 million. Oh, you have $100 million. So Sandy Alderson never knew what to do. I hope that they at least can extend them something so they can go and make some moves. But I would look more at offense than pitching, especially considering every team's looking for pitching, and the market's going to be so expensive for a starter or even bullpen.
I go to the White Sox. I go right to the White Sox. I look at the left side of the infield. Tim Anderson's my first trade candidate. You can improve him. You can improve at shortstop. John Birdie's done a great job converting to shortstop late in his career.
But Birdie should be a utility guy.
Yeah, exactly. Birdie's so good as a utility guy.
And if you had, imagine Tim Anderson, who's a very good contact hitter, great contact hitter, Louis Arise. That is quite a start to your lineup. Maybe go Arise and then Anderson, and all of a sudden you got guys on first and third with nobody out. And here comes Jorge Soler. Let's go.
Now, the other one from the White Sox that's interesting, that is probably more of a reach, but you bring up the Marlins payroll. If they have the space, they're very low payroll now. if they have the space, Yohan Moncada, because I know the White Sox are going to want to get rid of something there if they feel like they have to with Lance Lynn. Now, Yohan Moncada next year, I believe, is owed $24 million, maybe
Yeah.
$25 million the next year. Now, that's a lot. That's a whole lot. Right now, they've got Gene Segura playing third base, has been terrible for him, and whoever's filling in for him when he's out, it's a huge hole. Now,
I think
that's
I think you run away from Moncada. I think he's toxic. I don't
yeah.
mean like personality wise. I mean just ability. He's terrible. He was terrible last year. He's terrible this year. He's owed so much money. He's something maybe you make a team. If you want Tim Anderson, guess who? What you got to take this fucking guy too. Maybe that's
See,
kind of
I think that's I can see both sides, and I can totally see your side of it. I think your side of it's totally fair. There's another side of it, scouting director side of it, the talent evaluator side of it, that says, well, this guy's played in a toxic clubhouse. He had issues when they had COVID. The Chicago community, he has partied his balls off in the areas that he can, and he's known as a guy who likes to fuck around. There's not strong leadership in that clubhouse. The stuff with LaRussa, and maybe they put too much on him too early, and he played really well in the World Baseball Classic. He plays really well when he's with his fucking guys. So there is a sale point for Yohan Moncada if the White Sox are willing to make that. I think it's kind of interesting to look at this Marlins team at this trade deadline as one of the more interesting teams. The Orioles, we expect to make a move. There's a lot of
yeah.
teams where you
And we know what they're going to do. We know what they need to do. It's pitching, starting pitching. It's easy.
right, but what the Marlins do here will dictate exactly like how do they feel? Are they fucking serious? They're one of the few like we know the Orioles are going to make a move. That's why I bring them up as an example. But this is one of those situations where they've overperformed. They don't spend money. They've probably profited more now. They'll make more money than they anticipated this year. So do they really give a fuck? Is that front office, is this strategy, is this team really willing to do something, or are they just fucking lucky to survive this year and outperform the Mets while the Mets go spend $300 million? This is kind of the storyline I'm following with the Marlins is as they're getting good, because I'm committed to the fact that this is a good club that's going to continue to win games, that's won games, even though, as you bring up, the Pythagorean. So like they're going to get better. These averages, you look at the lineup. Yeah, Soler's the only one performing. Arai's the only one performing. Like if they start to level out and get average production, and these numbers start to go up a little bit, I don't see it getting worse for him. So that's why I'm very.
I worry long range with some of the things. Like Soler is probably a free agent at the end of the year. I think he has a $13 million player option, or will be $13 million. He'll hit all the qualifications he needs for that. He's going to obviously reject that. He'll be a free agent. He's their biggest bat. Jesus Sanchez has gotten a lot better this year. So they have him. De La Cruz, he's 26. Like, is it kind of like he is what he is kind of thing? One guy, I don't know if this is even realistic. It probably is. I'm sure Rocky fans are going to laugh at me about this. But like Ryan McMahon, I know they just extended him. But if you're the Rockies, you need to like just start over. Like you need to just blow it all up. And if you can get any pieces for a guy like McMahon, they need to strip it down to the core. Like this isn't work. Whatever they're trying to do, this weird like, oh, maybe we'll be 500. That doesn't work. Right now they are 29-47. They're on pace to lose around 98 games, and they've actually played the worst baseball of the year right now. So they're going to lose 100 games this year probably. I don't know what they're doing. You might as well just blow it up, right? Like I don't know what other option there is. I don't know what you need to just sell everything you can and try to go. I would go full Astros, full Orioles. Tear it down.
You extend Ryan McMahon. He's awesome. You can't trade him. He's got all these years left. I mean, he's signed until 2027. I wish it. Now my brain's just on the Colorado Rockies. I'm gonna lose sleep tonight thinking about their payroll situation because it's such a nightmare. And Zeke Tovar's been great. McMahon's on extension. You spent the money on Chris Bryant.
But you can't let that. You can't let the mistakes of the past hold you back for the future. They need to go full Astros, full Orioles. That's how the only way they can get out of this. And I get those teams, they have balls, man. They fucking stripped it down. They sucked for 3 years. And what happened? They're both really good.
Here's what I hate most about the Rockies right now. And so if you're a Rockies fan, please give me some context on this. But just looking at their, the top Top 11 guys that get plate appearances for him. Okay, I'm just going to read. Of the 11 guys, here's the ages: 32, 33, 29, 30, 31, 36, 31, 34. I mean, if you're going to hang 100 fucking losses, the only bright spot is you have, Brenton Doyle's been terrible. At least he's 25. He's on a Tovar's 21 years old. I call him. He's been good. But why just spend money on jerks and Profar? So maybe there's some, why does Randall Grichuk have 171 plate appearances? Why does Mike Moustakas have 130 plate appearances? That just baffles me. So maybe there's something I don't know about their farm system and the prospects that they have coming. But
They have
the Diamondbacks not making it easier.
season.
The Giants are good.
No.
The Dodgers aren't going anywhere. That's a fucking brutal division. The Rockies, maybe they just need to relocate.
Diamondbacks are good. Like they're not going away. What do you do? I think you need to rip it down. Now, you know what I'm afraid the Marlins are going to do? You brought up a name that is interesting, Mike Moustakas. That's what I'm afraid the Marlins are going to do. They're going to be like, oh, we'll trade some, some barely a prospect in Double A. Someone who's like the 30th best prospect in the organization for Mike Moustakas because he's cheap. They throw him at third base, and they're like, oh, see, we did something. And that's what I'm just afraid. I want them to make a big move. I want them to go get a legitimate hitter that they can have for next year because, like I said, with Soler probably leaving, I don't know what happens next year because you still have really good pitchers. So I'm concerned. Kim Ng, I think, is a great GM. I'm concerned about ownership's commitment to winning, as always, in Florida. Since 1997, this has been the problem.
If we just stay in the East real quick, we talked, the Phillies made it in the power rankings this week.
Yeah.
And so a couple days after that, do we regret that? How are they? Do you feel confident in that?
I don't feel bad about it. So what happened? So Monday they did not play and they lost today. They lost the game. So they've won 12 of 15 now. Okay.
So I guess more, it's not about all right, so they lost the game today. I guess it's just more in hindsight. I just want to briefly touch because some of the stuff we've talked about applies to the Phillies with their pitching staff. Zach Wheeler has been good but not great. Aaron Nola's been Ranger Suarez can be better. There's something about the World Series hangover in Rob Thompson's first full season as a manager, and Bryce Harper coming back. Trey Turner wasn't very good at the start of the season. Bryson Stott was excellent. They lost Rhys Hoskins. And they're just a team that's really, for me personally, has flown under the radar when we talk nationally and when we try to put the top teams together, and then all of a sudden, boop, Phillies are back there. And so I guess just as we're rounding out the East here, are we comfortable to say the Phillies that we understand to be the team that won the NL pennant last year, when they play, when I watch them, is it fair for me to look at them this year and hold that expectation now, or is it still a team that has to get their fucking bearings? When is it time for me to look at the Phillies and be like, that's the same team from last year, a little bit better?
Well, remember they won 86 games last year, so we're not talking about a team last year that was particularly great anyway. Taijuan Walker's been very good for them, ex-Met. Zach Wheeler's been good. He's been really good the last month or so. Aaron Nola concerns me. It's very similar to Alcantara, right? These are guys that had big years. Alcantara has a higher ceiling, but both guys have taken a step or two back this year. I think Nola will be fine, especially his peripherals. It looks pretty solid. Same kind of thing. His FIP is far better than his ERA is, so he'll probably be fine. I don't know. The Phillies are good. They got Bryce Harper back. I don't know. I also know that owner is committed to winning. So, if they have a situation where they can improve, that owner is going to step up. Where the Marlins, I'm a little more concerned with them short-term and long-term, that they're not going to do those same kind of things. I think the Phillies are I advocated for them in the power rankings. I think they're really good.
I think that's it, is what that might be the better, more concise way to say it. They're for real. Yes, right now. And I think you kind of start your measuring process there, which is fair, dude.
I'm going to Philadelphia this weekend. The Mets are playing. I'm going to go to all 3 games. I'm scared shitless, of facing this team. I think they're really good. I'm nervous for those games. I'm not going there confident. When you're a fan, you're like, all right, let's go. We're playing, the Royals. We're playing the A's. We got this. I'm going to the Phillies game. It's oh, fuck. I hope we don't lose 2 out of 3.
Have you been to Citizens Bank before, obviously?
Once. Only once.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I wasn't able to really explore the outfield. There's all that cool history stuff. So I really want to check that out and really do a deep dive.
Yeah, I think Philly should get more credit for the way they put their ballparks together, because Citizens Bank's next to Lincoln, which is by where the hockey stadium's at, and they've got this Comcast Xfinity thing. So it probably blows in mid-June on a Tuesday night. It's probably not that cool, but Being there
No,
for the
that's a
NLCS and the World Series, when they have to host a large crowd, it's like one of those big events. I think Philly's perfect for it. And there's something about that stadium where I know the dimensions are standard, and I know it's your typical ballpark, but it really feels like a smaller park. You feel
does.
like you're on top of the game. It's a great. I like that setup a lot. I think it should get more credit. I think it's just because it's a newer ballpark without like a ton of like cool shit that's happened there. Oh, I guess they got the World Series. What the fuck am I talking about?
Yeah, they've been to three there, right? And they've won one. You're right though. You feel like you're right on top of it. It feels
Hmm.
tiny. It feels like a bandbox. Um,
That's the
I don't.
word. That's it. That's the term. That's what did you say? Bandbox, right?
Yeah, like I don't like that it's separated from everything. So like I like being able to, you know, go from walk like Baltimore. It's perfect. I go from my hotel. I can walk right to the park, and then I can go get a nice dinner afterwards. Like I like not having to get an Uber. Like this sucks. Like we're gonna take the train. We'll take the Amtrak down. So we're not gonna have a car. So it's like, all right, we go to the game. We have to take the Uber from the hotel to the park. Like that whole thing kind of sucks. So I kind of wish it is what it is, but I think Baltimore setup is the most perfect.
Okay, I agree that I would rather in the long haul, but for a big game, for the World Series game, for the playoffs game, and I'm coming from a perspective, hey, not to brag here. I did have a good run in Philly this year. I went to the NLCS game 5 with Smitty, and that's when they clinched, and then I got to meet, spend some time with his family. That was really cool, like non-Barstool related. I mean,
Right.
Barstool related, but non-content related to hang out with Smitty for that day. And then Jake and I went back and went to a World Series game at Philly. I think it was game 3 of the Astros just fucking pounded them. We watched a game with Kevin Negandhi, who was next to me, and like Jeff Passan came down and watched an inning with us. That was a super cool experience. That was like a week later. And then 3 weeks later, I was back. I took my dad to Army Navy, and we were down for Lincoln Financial. So maybe it was just a run of really like really good experiences in a row where I like where the location's at. But I think that's different. The White Sox do it too, where they have like the big parking lot scene and setup. But let's go back. I'm sorry, we're gonna get like way deep into stuff about like setups and everything. Um, can we go back to the Central or go out to the Central for a
Okay.
second? And is it Rico? Is it you? Is it somebody deserves? Yeah, like a parade of roses for calling out the Reds.
Rico. I think got him at like 17-1 to win the division. I was excited about the LA De La Cruz, but I wasn't ready to like crown them champions by any stretch. I mean, Andrew Abbott, like I still don't know if they're going to win the division, but they've won 10 games in a row now, and that team is one of the most exciting ones to watch. And they just got Joey Votto back yesterday. So I don't know if you're a Reds fan, what's better than that? Like that, how exciting it's to watch your veteran guy you love, your future Hall of Famer probably, with these young guys on a team that is on top of the division right now. They've won 10 in a row. I don't think it's when's the last time it's been this much fun to be a Reds fan? Probably 95 when they went to the LCS, maybe 90.
No, the Joey Votto gave him some good years. Come on, don't fucking do that
They
to
went to
Joey.
the playoffs a couple years, but they were never really. And I guess this is the case too. I guess it's more the surprise is fun of it. Like, look, this team is not as good as those Votto teams that made the playoffs. Those teams weren't great. They were okay, but it's more just like this kind of came out of nowhere, and it's just like, oh my god, the Reds went from being the most boring team in baseball maybe to one of the most thrilling, almost overnight.
Yeah, now I'm gonna bring up a name that you brought up before, and like I feel like Mike Moustakas is. The Reds went out and signed Mike Moustakas one year. I think it was like the COVID year or
Yeah.
something. That was like a big. Um, Cincinnati. We've said this before on the show. I'm gonna say it again. I want to make this clear. The baseball world is so much better when Cincinnati's good because it's such a historical place geographically. Like that Cincinnati has hosted a professional baseball team. The Reds have been a professional baseball team for as long as we've played professional baseball. And so that may not mean a lot to people that are outside of Cincinnati, unfamiliar with the NL Central. If you're a Yankees fan, if you're an East Coast guy, whatever, like the people there care just as much as you guys do. And in fact, in an area where like this is the biggest thing in town, this is the biggest ticket in town. This is what fucking Cincinnati's all about. And there's kind of some sense to me where like if you take all that pride you could have built up with the Johnny Bench and the Joe Morgan and the Pete Rose era, and even having a World Series championship in the early '90s, bringing Griffey back in the late '90s, like it's fair to look back and say, yeah, these 2 decades you've had to limp fucking through, man. You really have had to limp through, and so it's fair to say like we haven't really seen that spirit of Cincinnati when you have a great baseball team. that you can look at for like years. So that maybe that's what Ellie De La Cruz and Matt McClain give. I think if they can get to the playoffs and win a division or take a wild card or they make a trade deadline splash, I think this is going to be the team that people fall in love with. More
Oh
than the
yeah.
Marlins, more than other, because you're going to see little Matt McClain, and then you're going to see Ellie De La Cruz, and see Andrew Mabbitt mow people down. Nick Lodolo's going to get his feet, get settled in and shit. This is a team that like people really love, and you know what? We saw a guy come back in the lineup this week. What's his name? Joey fucking Votto.
Yeah, Votto's back. Yeah, it's huge. Like the Reds, it ain't easy being a Reds fan. So let's look at their history for a second. 1940, they won the World Series, right? I'm going by memory on that one. And then they didn't go back to a World Series until what? Oh, 61 they lost to the Yankees, right? And then they don't go back again until they have that run in the 70s, obviously, but they've only won 4 World Series since 1940 on. Only 3 World Series from 41 on. So since World War II, they've only won 3 World Series: 75, 76, and 90. It seems like in our mind, the Reds have this, are awesome. They're because we have the big red machine. We've grown up with it. We hear about it all the time. But that was just one decade. Other than that, the Reds have been pretty bad for almost since integration. They've been pretty lousy. So it's awesome that this great baseball town is getting this jolt of excitement that, like I said, instantly made them one of the most exciting teams in the sport. And the cool thing is, if they win the division, they'll get home games. So they'll get a 5-game series, and they'll get some games in Cincinnati. So that could be fun to watch.
See, but I don't want to just sit and measure an organizational success by winning World Series, Chris. You know that. I don't want to do that because they lost the World Series in 70. They lost the World Series in 70.
They don't go to the World Series either, though, Carl. They don't even get there.
They lost NLCS in 79.
Yeah.
Okay, dude, they were first in 90. They finished in first place in 95. They're in first place in 94 before the strike. You got, a bunch of second places littered in here. What we're talking about though is when you're bottom barrel. We know bottom barrel. When you're what the Kansas City Royals have been since they've won that World Series year after year. I mean, I think they've still been competitive. Don't tell me that when Ken Griffey Jr. signed there and the Ken Griffey Jr. or Senior stuff, don't tell me in the late 90s with Sean Casey and all that shit that you weren't rock hard for Cincinnati. Barry Larkin. That was a thing.
But remember, if you go back there, first off, the Royals have won more World Series in my lifetime than the Reds have.
Stop talking about World Series championships.
They've been to World Series than but you talk about the late 90s. If you remember back then, the whole thing was, is Barry Larkin going to be a goner? So every year it felt like, Barry Larkin's going to leave. Remember, I think he was he traded Mets and he had a no trade clause. There was it was always that other shoe was going to drop with Larkin. He's always 1 foot out the door. I know he wasn't. He was a loyal Red, but it almost felt like that wasn't going to last. And then Griffey goes there and gets hurt every month. So that didn't work either. I don't know. I'm just saying I give a lot of credit to Reds fans. They are under the radar they've had a tough go. I don't think they get enough credit that maybe we give other organizations. Like I said, the Royals. Oh, the Royals. Yeah, the Royals stink a lot, but they won recently. Being a Reds fan ain't easy. They deserve some credit.
And now, as I go through the Reds franchise page here, I just want to call out that there's maybe an alarming lack of notable franchise players, because you could call all the great ones off the top of your head: Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, Joe Morgan, Barry Larkin. And then once you get after that, guys don't have wins above replacement over 50. I mean, Joey Votto, 64.7. Frank Robinson. But Frank Robinson did great things with Baltimore too after he left Cincinnati.
Yeah, and he was fucking traded for Milt Pappas.
Right. Hey,
he's a fine pitcher, but come on. I mean,
his daughter's friends of the family.
I'm sure. Everything that sounds about poor Milt Pappas. Milt Pappas had a nice career. He won 200 games, but he's known as the guy who got traded. But imagine you're a Reds fan, right? You get a guy that's a franchise player, and they fucking trade him. It's fuck.
Yeah.
It ain't easy being a Reds fan. And the Reds, Eric Davis, I'm old enough to remember when he was he was Willie Mays Jr. I mean, he was incredible. And then it doesn't always work out for 20 years. But for 5 years, he was incredible. And it was cool. He came back to the Reds. I know in 96, he had a good year for them. But, you're right. They haven't had those big, giant. Yeah, and they haven't had any great pitchers, right? Of recent note. Jose Rijo had a nice run. I mean, but they haven't had that great arm. Maybe Andrew Abbott's that guy for them. I don't know.
No, I mean, in their franchise history, in the Cincinnati Reds franchise history, they don't have. I mean, maybe no, Bid McPhee was the second baseman who died in.
Yeah, Big
Who,
McPhee is
he
never going
left
away.
in 1899. I don't
Yeah,
think he was one.
no.
Noodles Hahn. Noodles Hahn is their
He pitched
greatest
in
pitcher of all time.
1901, didn't he? Like, Noodles Hahn is going way back. That's like pre-World Series stuff. Some of
Okay,
these names going up.
Noodles Hahn only pitched for 8 years. He threw 2,000 innings in 8 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, Noodles Hahn was a guy like I said 1900, 1901, if my memory's right. Like Noodles Hahn is, we're talking way back. It's tough.
This
Like who are the best Red pitchers? You know, you have to go. They made that deal for Tom Seaver, and then some of the other guys they had, like Gary Nolan, some other guys they had in that. They never had the long careers. Gary Nolan's shoulder, he had a Hall of Fame start, and then his shoulder went. They got Seaver in '77, but his best days were behind him. But he's still good for them. Tom Browning was okay for a while. He had a perfect game, but he's not like what are we doing here? The Red,
Yeah, maybe.
It's not easy being a Reds fan.
Okay.
That's all.
We should do it. We should do an episode on March Shot one day. Just like the horror stories of that.
We get thrown off YouTube, I think, right?
I know we would get like even just like talking about this woman would get us
What
like
a horrible person.
like even just like relaying any of these stories. So
We
I'll
should
leave
get
it.
this is going to sound like a joke. It's not. Brandon Walker and I, we were having a long conversation about Reds and then like the late '80s and like how shitty Marge Shot was. Like Brandon would be a great guy to have on. He's got a bunch of funny Marge Shot stories. Like two old guys talking Marge Shot. We were trying to explain to like the younger people in the office like how horrible she was. People couldn't believe it.
You know what? I'd be interested in this. I'd become friends with a guy who was on the Reds World Series championship team, Hal Morris.
Oh yeah, of course. A first baseman. He hit for a great average, never good power, but I tell you, he was on the '90 team, like you said. He was a guy that hit 300 for you. He'd fall out of bed and hit 300.
Yeah, we connected because he was a Big Ten baseball guy. He walked on at Michigan. I walked on in Illinois, and we met in Arizona. And we, just like small talk bullshit. It was like, yeah, no, I remember you. And where'd you play college ball? So we get in the Big Ten stuff. And I love what you said. He could hit 300 rolling out of bed because he was like, I just can always hit. I don't even know how to explain it. You just be able to hit line drives and stuff. Wasn't much of a power hitter, but he's considered like one of the great talent evaluators in baseball. He was a scouting director or the player development director for the Angels when Trout was coming up and when they had a couple other players with them.
Wow. Okay.
And now he does more like player development consulting stuff. And it is almost, to be honest with you, he's so good at player development in scouting that he can't work for a single team. He has to work on like a larger scale because he's so good at interpreting like young players and motivations and stuff. And it was cool to actually hear. It's like, so be honest with me. I know you're a Reds guy, but like, do you really think like this Reds team is legit? And he's like, man, dude, you look up and down, and I know none of these names jump out, but there's so many names that can jump out. And if they're healthy and if they play together and you get these reps together, and there's so many players and not all of them are going to pan out. They're only going to need one or two or three to be as good as they can be. And if they do get those guys to be as good as they can be, they're just going to fucking start running away, man. I'm telling you. Like that. And now, okay, go look at the Reds roster. They're all young. They're all under team control. All of these guys are under team. They'll all be going through arbitration together. So now they get to pick and pop who gets the extension. Matt McClain will get extended, and now I have a tangent on that. He also turned down first round money to go to UCLA, so who knows if he will take an extension. That's actually an interesting thing to think about. Because Matt McClain, I know you say, hey, undersized middle infielder, right, probably happy to be here. No, my friends, out of high school, 5'8" kid, drafted 16th overall, turned it down to go to UCLA. Now he's back and got drafted again out of UCLA in the first round. I don't know if they'll. Yeah.
That's a good point. But the Reds, though, like you talk about those young guys. Well, Moustakas, this is like the Mike Moustakas show. His contract, he's off the books next year, and they paid him a lot of money. And then we mentioned before, I think maybe on this show, how Joey Votto, he's making $20 million, but he's got next year it's a $7 million buyout. So that takes $13 million off the books for next year. So now we're talking like $31 million, and you basically only lost Joey Votto because Moustakas isn't even there anymore. You can use that money to go fill out this roster. And the National Nintendo's up for grabs. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I know the Cubs are getting better. The Cardinals can't be this bad again. But like that division is ready. It's primed for someone to jump in with young, exciting players and take over. There's a real opportunity. This is different than the Marlins. To go back to where we started, the Marlins, I'm always kind of nervous with them because it's like, oh man, the Mets are there, the Phillies are there, the Braves are there. They got everyone locked up. It's going to be hard for the Marlins to compete every year. The door is wide open for the Reds. They need to take advantage of it, and I hope they do.
This makes me really happy to bring this up because I think we all forgot the Reds traded Luis Castillo last year.
Yep.
In return, they got 2 top 50 prospects that are, let's see, this dude's Edwin Arroyo, who's 19 years old.
Okay.
And Noel V. Marte, who's 21 years old. They're both middle infielders. They're both in Double-A. They're both doing extremely well. They also got 2 other players with that.
Yep.
And I just bring that up as a sidebar. It was like we can look at who these Reds are and get excited about them now, but this isn't just the wave and the push they made for the rebuild, as a lot of teams do when they have young players that come up. These are young players that are up, and there's another wave that's going to come, and it's going to be led by those 2 guys.
And guess who has a high draft pick this draft coming up? The Reds. The Reds have a top 10 pick, right?
Yep.
Because they were so bad last year. No, this is legit, and this is like I know it's tough. My team's not playing very well this year. It's tough being a fan of some of these losing teams, but like we mentioned earlier with the Marlins. The Marlins traded Starling Marte, and they got Jesus Luzardo, who's a major piece for them right now. And they traded for the Cardinals, they got Sandy Alcantara. Like, it's not easy for some of these teams, like the Tigers, like with Castellani, or being a Royals fan ain't easy right now. But just know you can make some of these moves. They're not going to pay off this year, maybe, but then down the road, a year, 2 or 3 years from now, this is how you can build this team, and you have the right people in place. I don't know. This could be, I know it's disappointing in July when your team's out of it, but there can be gold at the end of that rainbow.
Yeah, the Cardinals have major issues if you're going to look at them 3 to 5 years from now, because I know they've got the position players, but none of them have really emerged to stand next to Goldschmidt and Arenado.
No.
And some of those younger MVP candidates you talked about with, those guys don't really exist with them. The pitching staff's got major issues. Yeah.
Goldschmidt's gone after next year. He's a free agent after next year. And Flaherty and Montgomery are free agents into this year. Like,
all the more reasons why you go back to the Reds and you say, okay, now
yeah,
the success you have now, and then you can create this gap. And, the Cubs have their extensions, but they're pretty heavily Pete Crow Armstrong better pan out. Seiya Suzuki better stay healthy. Matt Mervis better be a good first baseman. It's not like you have this range to pull in guys and be strategic about. Meanwhile, the Brewers, they've maxed out as much as they can get. And how much can you expect? Like, if they're not going to turn it, the Brewers are a solid organization, generally speaking, with the resources that they deploy. If you were the Reds, though, they're not a threat. They're not a threat. And this just goes back to the Reds and their sense of urgency. And again, the Pirates, they'll get the most they can. Derek Shelton will get the most he can out of those guys, but they're years away from what, at least what the Reds have in front of them. I guess maybe not years away, but I feel much better about the Reds than I do about anybody else in that division. If we're going to see, if everybody gets $150 million in payroll, I'll take the Reds roster.
Oh yeah, doesn't it feel like the Brewers are in neutral? It just feels like they're just rolling down the hill, maybe, hoping there's no inclines down the road. I just feel like
this is what they like to do. This is how the Brewers do it, man. They just kind of
38 and 35. I guess that's I don't know. I know this is the NL show, but I have to bring this up because I'm not on the AL show. But the AL Central, the top team is the Twins. They're 2 under 500. That's crazy. We're almost at the halfway point. There's no team who's even a game under 500 in the AL Central. I saw it today. I was born. That's crazy. That's crazy.
It's such a natural phenomenon. It's like seeing snow in May, where you're like, how? It's like, well, the way it works is you got to get the wind gust here and the polar cap here, and if the Earth is tilted this way and the sun hits this way and the precipitation is basically what you've said is, well, the Royals can't be this bad. No, they are. The White Sox should probably get better. No, they actually got worse. The Guardians are always competitive under Tito Francona.
No, I love Francona, but like,
Right.
yeah, even then they're 400, 500.
And like the Tigers are like, yeah, sure. The Tigers are a nice story every couple days, or
Yeah,
they win an exciting game, but like they're not good.
and the
And
Twins, they've gotten probably the most they can out of those three starters, four starters
the
if you
fact
count
that
David
they had
Roper.
three starters that led the power rankings discussion for 5 fucking weeks and they're under 500, like
It's
it's the complete opposite of the Marlins discussion where you're like, well, the
yeah,
Marlins have won despite,
right.
where the Twins have lost despite. That's a crazy dichotomy.
And we talk to kind of bring it back to the end a little bit. Like, we talk about the White Sox, right? I know it's a team me and you both have our eye on for like, oh, Tim Anderson, Lucas Giolito. We start looking. They're only 5 out. Like, I think they should sell because there's no way they're gonna win a World Series. Like, there's no way they get like the team's not good. But are they gonna have the balls to sell? I don't know. It's tough to sell that to your fan base. If you're only 3.5 out in July, it's tough to sell those pieces and be like, sorry guys, that isn't our year. Because you might get some blowback.
They'll do it. You want to
They
bet?
should. They should do
They'll
it
do
though.
it. They don't give a fuck. They'll just be like, we lowered the price of nacho helmets, though. One guy that we should definitely call out because he's been called out multiple times in this programming going back last year into this year, twice, once by Dansby Swanson, another time by Matt Olson, and then repeatedly throughout this year. We just have talked so much about Michael Harris. And Michael Harris with the Braves signing the
Yep.
contract and a lot of questions. If you looked at his peripherals, you watched him, it wasn't an injury thing. It was just more like maybe he's just not seeing the ball well, or there's a slump, or it could be a slight timing thing. He was really bad through May. He had a 170 batting average, I think a 260 OBP, like a sub 550 OPS. So you could objectively say he was about 50% worse than an average major league player. Since then, he's got a 1,050 OPS. I hate how much he strikes out versus he walks, but he's hit for in the last couple of weeks. He's really turned it on, and I know we've talked about the Braves. It's just like a clear runaway. They look great in the National League and all that stuff. That's with an underperforming Michael Harris, and so now you're
Right.
seeing him in June heat up, and fucking God help us if he starts playing at that because he's not an MVP player when you look at the fucking on a day to day. He's an MVP player when you go back after a 6-year cumulative period and you look at the WAR and you go, wait a second. That guy had 35 wins above replacement in a 6-year window. So I'm not saying in one particular season where he's clearly the best, but he's more of like a cumulative, amazing player. And he seems to be catching a stride. I don't know if you have thoughts on Michael Harris.
I do. Yeah. So Harris.
Oh, did you hate that? Did you hate that take, that like the cumulative WAR thing?
No, not at all. No, I agree with you. Michael Harris is a really talented guy. Obviously underperformed, just like you said. I think he won Player of the Week. I think he had 3 homers last week. He's been a beast. Throw some cold water on it real quick for a second. Look who the Braves have played this month. So is he someone that can really just beat the shit out of bad pitching, but struggles when it comes to good pitching? I don't know. He is. I would say that's probably not the case because he's so athletic. He's not a guy that needs to. He's so great in center field. He's a very good player. So I don't think this is the case. But anytime I see a guy like tee off in September, remember when they had a 40-man roster? You'd have like some tomato can pitching in the 7th inning of some game because they have like 80 pitchers on the roster. I'm always like, should September stats matter? Should these stats in June matter? They probably should. But I am. This is the only reason I'm a little bit apprehensive with the Michael Harris thing. Although I will say, I'm playing devil's advocate. I don't really believe that. I think Harris is a very good player and he'll be just fine. But it's something that
I love both sides. I only want to talk about both sides of the argument. Like, I don't even know if I want to pick one side. I just would rather talk about both sides. And those are great two sides because, as you say this, I think to myself frequently, like, what is bad pitching? What's bad pitching in Major League Baseball these days? Like, I look at these guys, everybody's throwing 96, 97. But you're right, though. Then I go look, and I'm like, the Tigers don't have the Major League depth that other squads do, and the Rockies don't have the Major League depth that other squads do. Or you're right.
Even the good teams. And the Dodgers threw Michael Grove out there for 4 starts. He's the area 14. Like, everyone, except for like the Marlins, I guess, everyone has starting pitching issues. And then that trickles down to middle relief. Like, with the Mets, like, look at we have decent guys in 8th and 9th inning, but our sixth and seventh are fifth and sixth are a disaster. So if you're throwing out Jordan Lyles and he's getting the shit kicked out of him, and you're bringing in a guy in the fifth and sixth inning, that's gonna, and you have a guy who hits a home run off that guy in the sixth inning of a 9-2 game. I don't know. It's not as impressive as facing a quality, reliever and getting a home run or something. Or a double.
You're correct. This is the stuff we need to talk about. I think there's still bad pitching. It's just different. It looks different. It's still bad. It just looks different. Bad pitching back in the day. It's like, and when I say back in the day, it's like I'm thinking 06 Pirates. And here comes like a Russ Ohlendorf and his 89-mile-an-hour sinking fastball from Princeton University, and it's like, well, Russ Ohlendorf will give you, and I hate to call him out like that, but
yeah, right.
Like that. When I think of bad pitch, I think of a guy that throws 90 with a sinker, and like he's got a couple good pitches. It's like he was good enough to make it through AAA, and then you were like, fuck it, he's earned the right to go to the big leagues and get his shit hammered, and it was just that over and over again. And this ties back to what we had said about player development, where I think they're just better at finding guys and developing them and getting them better for the big league. So we don't have to see that anymore. Like, that's so rare. Why the fuck is this? Very rarely, I think, you see a rookie or a young guy get in the big leagues. You're like, how did this guy get here? But that was a thing before, I feel like. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's less of that now. I mean, it still exists. I mean, so Michael Harris last week, 3 home runs. That's awesome. That's great. He had 5, 6, 9 RBIs. Awesome. But he faced the Tigers 3 times and the Rockies 4 times. So, he didn't face a single good pitcher. He probably didn't face many average pitchers. He probably faced a lot of below average guys.
But
these games still count. But that's the only thing I'm a little bit weary. But I think July, I'm sure the schedule will get tougher, and I'm sure he'll still do. I believe in Michael Harris.
The only thing we're going just like, and this is what we plan in the green screen room. I'm like, where do we want to go? And you're like, just start with the Marlins, because I know that's we could do 10 hours on that. So here we are, maybe a little bit longer than I'd like. There's just the last thing I want to close with, and this is kind of now becoming like a weekly checkpoint because the urgency is starting to settle in. Sure, the Giants are a nice story. The Dodgers got their stuff going on. The Diamondbacks. Just like every week, though, we got to put a pin in the Padres here and just see what's going on. And so the Padres are still. They lost a heartbreaker last night at the time of the recording. They're as down as I've seen them. I think everybody expected them to get better. I do want to go back to the 2017 Cubs, where they were just below 500 throughout the first half. It was just the way they were. They just lost fucking games. Why aren't they any better? They've got the same players. They're good players. This Padres team's troubling, and I guess there's a sense of, I want the Padres to succeed now. And tell me if I'm crazy with this, but I want them to succeed because I don't want other owners to be like, well, if you spend money, it doesn't work. They went out and they spent a fuck ton of money, and now they've done this. We don't need any case studies for cheap ass owners to be like, well, look what the Padres did. They only got south.
They'll find their way anyway. It doesn't matter. They'll find whatever example they want to find. All
right. Well, what about David Ortiz calling out Juan Soto for not taking the $450 million? Does that get your fucking cherries moving?
Yeah, David Ortiz should worry about David Ortiz's wallet. David Ortiz, a couple of years ago, had a yard sale at his house because he's so broke, and he's selling paper towels to people. Fucking David Ortiz. Worry about David Ortiz. Worry about that. Worry about what you got going on. Don't worry about Juan Soto. Juan Soto's doing fine. The Padres. I think so. This is where I think about the Padres a lot because, I'm a Mets fan. I'm really annoyed. The Mets and Padres have a very similar record, have a very similar situation. I am much more optimistic with the Padres, and I think it's because I'm more removed from it. I think the Padres are going to be just fine. I think the Mets are fucked. Now, I don't know if it's because I can be more analytical with the Padres. 'Cause I'm not emotionally tied to it. The Padres, I think, are just also playing better. They've won, I believe, 7 of the last 11. They're leading right now as we tape this against the Giants, who have won 8 in a row. So I just think the Padres are going to be okay. I believe that they are going to be in the – I don't know if they'll win the division because the Diamondbacks are very good. The Giants are very good. The Dodgers are – they're always around. But I think the Padres will still be in the wild card. I believe that they'll be in October baseball.
See, it just hurts because the Padres, all right. No, I'm with you. They did just win. They did win after losing the first against Tampa. They had been hotter. Maybe I'm just reaching too much on the Padres here because I expect them to be better with the talent that they have. I mean, I shouldn't say I expect them. I picked them to fucking bum out.
You did. You said they would not make the playoffs. Which you're so far you're right. I mean, they're 8 back of the Diamondbacks right now.
A lot of that's just like that Mets playoff win. These are the type of guys that like you look at that roster. That roster doesn't win a playoff series, lose a playoff series, and then get motivated in the offseason. That's a team that won a playoff series and was like, we won a playoff series. Fucking, we're going home. We're partying. It's like you fucking lost, dude. You didn't. You lost to the Phillies. But I look at that. I look at that club, and I'm like, that's a club that's like, yo, we made it to the NLCS. Let's go, dude. High five. And that shit carries over year to year.
Yeah,
I'll die on that hill. I will. I'll die on that hill. The psyche of like wanting to get up and go win a baseball game. Corbin Carroll wants to win a baseball game today. He wants to beat you tomorrow. He wants to be as good as he can
I
be.
gotta think some of
Shoot out
these.
his
I
face.
gotta imagine some Rockies want to beat you too, but they're just not going to. They're not good.
Uh, I think a lot of guys on the Rockies, Clemmer, to tell you the truth, are happy to be there. I think a lot of the guys on the Rockies are actually like, so what does this mean for my service time? And I actually think there's very few major league players that like want to win a World Series. I think they all want to, but I think so few of them would say like in spring training, like, yeah, the goal this year is to win a World Series. I think almost all those guys like the goal this year is to not get hurt, to play
Yeah,
well. If we're good enough, like they're not even willing to talk like that because the game's so fucking hard. Like to be a guy, like that's what Derek Jeter is so cool because he'd be like, yo, we're out to win a World Series. Like, dude, you know how good you have to be to say that shit? Like to fucking just carry yourself is like, yeah, we're out to win. I'm out of words. It takes my breath away to say that. And now, as I said out loud, are there players that come to mind right now in today's game that walk around? They're like, I'm out to win a World Series. Bryce Harper, maybe. Who else? Mike Trout doesn't even say that shit.
no, Trout's not going. It's just not his personality type. No, I mean they're right, and and that's not even a knock on the players. They're going to worry about different things than fans are. Fans are we're emotional. We want our teams to win. That's all we. Like, you're right. The guys are going to care about things like service time and staying healthy and playing for that next contract or whatever that is. But that's kind of it's their job. So I don't knock them for that as long as they're out there hustling. I don't really as long as they're running to first base. I don't, and diving for fly balls, and as long as they're doing that kind of stuff, I don't mind that at all. It's a business.
And I think as we wrap this show, it's been a great show. Delighted to talk baseball with you. Is like, I was talking about this the other day with Castellani. Is like, there aren't a lot of dogs. There aren't a lot of
No.
guys that don't like. Mancada jumps to mind. He's got so much talent and is just so impressive when he walks on a baseball field. He's like it's like if he was a fighter, if he was a boxer, like yeah, I mean he's so impressive physically, like he might get in a ring and not train for a fight because he's just so utterly fucking powerful and he's gonna have to get his shit pushed around like that. Maybe he does make a calibration as a young guy, but think of like a 30-year-old guy that cocktails it around in baseball. I mean, maybe Marcelo Zuna, but that guy will play his fucking dick off too. Like a lot of these guys play their balls off, and then they have a bad moment. We're like, oh, so that guy, like Javi Baez plays his balls off, and then I'll have a bad moment. You're like, well, this guy's got his head up his ass. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, he also plays his like he leaves it all out there and stuff. And
So when free agency happened in the mid '70s, the knock was this: it was you're going to give these guys Catfish Hunt or whatever $1 million. They're not going to care anymore. They have their money and they're not going to give a shit anymore. But that's not the opposite's true. What happens when you give someone a little taste, they're going to want more. It's just capitalism. That's the way humans just work, especially in America. So it's like if you give someone a little bit and they know even more is down there, they're going to work even harder and harder and harder. It's just so funny to read some old news articles or to read some stuff. There's a great book I recommend. It's called Split Season. It's about the 1981 season. It's really good. It's just stick with the 81 season. It's really interesting read. It's a quick read. And they talk about some of these things, and some of like the mentality back then was like, oh, these guys are just gonna retire when they're 31 because they're gonna have $1 million and they can just quit. It's like, no, these guys are gonna work even harder and do even more because there's so much money on the table now. It's just so funny to how we perceive one change is gonna happen, but actuality, that change is very different than anything that people would have expected.
what's the name of that book?
It's called Split Season. It's worth reading.
I'm interested in a baseball book club now that you mention this because like I want to read it and I want to talk to you about it. And maybe get like a fucking Oprah book list club going or something.
there's so many great baseball books, whether it be Ball 4. There's, The Worst Team Money Could Buy. If you want to go read kind of what it was like being a Red Sox fan, in the 80s, Curse of Bambino by Shaughnessy is an interesting read. There's so many great baseball books. There's even a great one that came out. I'm only halfway through it, about the Astros scandal. That is incredibly informative.
Yeah, Evan Drellich, I believe, did that.
Yeah, Evan Drellich wrote it. It was winning.
Yeah, he's great.
Everything or something like that. It's a very good book. So there's so many great baseball books. Baseball lends itself to movies and to books so well.
Joe Posnanski's 100 is very good. I know Joe Posnanski does a great job of telling the story of the history of baseball. It'll make you really understand, especially with the Negro Leagues and just how the context of talent and players that you've never even heard of, that'll make your jaw on the fucking floor. Damn, dude. Really
with Joe Paterno. Didn't love the Joe Paz stuff. He's writing a book about Joe Paterno and all that stuff.
No.
And no, he didn't do anything bad like that. But he was writing a book with Paterno, and he could have basically broken the story, or could have really got a deep interview about Paterno. He's like, "No, I'm writing a Father's Day book. I'm not going to go down that road." He kind of took the lazy
route. All right.
Out.
Well, that compromised my takes on his top 100.
His book about the top 100 baseball players is really good, and he does have a really good way of making baseball history kind of really entertaining and interesting.
You're one of a kind, because I should know that about Posnanski. Maybe this wasn't the time to tell me, but don't hold back, and you just did that.
I never do.
No, you never do. That just from the first time we met on a snake draft, I was like, this guy just fucking fires. I love this dude.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But the book, I read the book, the baseball book you're referencing, it's fantastic. I read it after this, that stuff happened, and I still enjoyed it. He's still, it wasn't he's not fucking Sandusky. He's not a monster. I just thought he could have been a bit more of a journalist but that doesn't mean he's a bad baseball writer.
I think one cool thing is I'll just say this about baseball history and reading about baseball and old stories that I wasn't alive when this shit happened. I can't relate to it. I don't understand, but it's cool to go back in that time. One thing that I find that lends itself when you look at baseball history is the ability to personally identify with some of these players. Today, I can't. There maybe now and then there's a player, Kyle Hendricks is interesting, is kind of this modern, he throws 88, he's got a changeup. So what makes him a player? He just has touch and feel. But if you go back and you listen to these stories of these players, of guys that, worked in coal mines and came up and were working in bars, or they just you can identify with players, and that's one of the reasons we brought up Johnny Saint earlier. Is man, if I was, that's who I would have been. I would have been the guy that would have been so interested in finding that edge and standing next to Warren Spahn and being man, he's so much more talented than I am, and he throws so much harder, and he's so much more dominant. But I want to be as good as that. The stories of how these players became successful, and there's so much of overcoming stuff and more humanity and shit tied to these guys being successful than today. It's just oh, well, you're Bobby Witt. All Bobby Witt's ever done is play baseball. His dad was in the big leagues. He grew up he was made to be an awesome shortstop, and he is an awesome shortstop, and he'll be a great shortstop. And there are those players back then, but I'm kind of getting long in the tooth about it. It's something I've enjoyed.
I'm gonna show you something. Let me get something.
All right, so if you're watching this on YouTube, Clemmer's getting up. He had a great dinner tonight. Wore a collared shirt.
So this is a baseball encyclopedia. So my dad got me the 1987 but this is with Baseball Reference didn't exist, and this is how I spent. This is the last year it was in print, 2007. But this was the book that taught me everything about baseball, and it has the stats by year. But you see how it has text there, and it does it for every year, and that taught me not just the numbers, but the stories and the names and what mattered and the humanity of baseball. And that's why this was such a great learning tool for me. I still read it almost every day. The last year is 2006, so it's not going to have. But I'll have a copy of this until the day I die. You can see it's kind of in rough shape, but I love this book, and I had it every year from '87 till 2006 when it went out of print. But this is the reason I love baseball, was this book. But I said the cool thing was every year would tell a little story. There you go. How about that? 1991, right? And having this, it goes all the way back to 1901. So having that was just such a cool thing for me as a kid. The best gift I ever got in my life. My dad got me that.
Makes me so happy. It makes me so happy to see, if you're watching this on YouTube, you just saw just a beat-worn book that's been flipped through 1,000 times over, that's 16 years old, and I know there's 20 other editions before it. And as we record this, I'm in a hotel in Omaha, Nebraska. The College World Series is going on. I'm surrounded by Little League teams and the Rawlings people and the Wilson people, and you're in the heart, the epicenter of where baseball's at, where all these little kids are running around. They want to be the next great player for LSU and Tennessee, and like it like to record the show. I had this great conversation as I'm sitting here in the epicenter of where so many kids and so many younger players and these college players that want to be great, and everybody's just like enjoying the sport for what it is, and this tournament and crowning a national champion. It's been a remarkable experience. And the one thing I'd say about Omaha, there'll be time to talk more about it. Our vlog series is up on YouTube. Check it out. We're trying to show you more behind the scenes of what's going on with the game action, what life is like around Omaha and the cool stuff. But a lot of people you talk to, they'll say it's a bucket list. You'll run into groups of guys that are in their 40s. It's like, what is this, a bachelor party? Who's getting divorced? You see like 10 guys in their 50s or in like Tommy Bahama shirts. And it's like, no, Joe's always wanted to go. He booked it in December. So we drove out. Where are you guys from? We're from the panhandle of Idaho. We're from Colorado Springs. We're from Arkansas. We're from places, no representation here, but they've come out here, and literally every person you're going to talk to is going to say, holy fucking shit. So if you're listening to this and you've thought about it, call your dad, call your cousins, get your buddies together, take 3 days, grow some balls, drive the 10 hours to Omaha. I fucking guarantee you it is worth it. If you love baseball the way like we love it, even if you're not a college fan, just to see it for 2 or 3 days, it just puts faith in why the sport's, it's just better than what happens to your major league team. Like, even if the Cubs won't lose 10 in a row, I can come out here and enjoy this fucking sport. I wanted to say that. I'm passionate about it.
There you go. Yeah, I know you are. It seems like you guys are having a great time out there for sure.
Yep. Yeah, we're putting it together. Speaking of which, I will say this bucket list experience on doing a Cooperstown trip. So
now we're talking my language. Yes, that is.
I know. Yes, I'm doing the college. You're like, yeah, I know LSU's cool. I get the concept of that, but Cooperstown
is the greatest place in the world. I love the hotel. The Oswego is amazing. The shops are incredible. The downtown, it's so lovely. And then you have the greatest room of all time, the Plaque Room, the greatest place in the world.
Man, I can't wait to see it with you. This is the Barstool Baseball National League Show, Wednesday show. Subscribe to the feed, guys. Please share the show. Obviously, just guys that love baseball, talking baseball, trying to get you through the season here. We've got some great programming coming up as we get out of the main core of the 4 sports. Baseball settles in here. We get like 6-7 weeks to ourselves. It's gonna be awesome. We'll be back on Friday.
Deadline coming up. We got All-Star game coming up. Let's go.
Our trade deadline covered. No, we got to plan that.
I'm ready for. I would do a live stream the whole like whatever you guys want, whatever we want to do. Like I'm all in because I'm gonna watch anyway. Like I'm there anyway. Like I'm glued to the TV. I'm thinking these thoughts anyway. So I'm all in.
I want to get like a disgraced GM to do with us, like Steve Phillips.
I think that guy would do anything. I mean, he's literally. You could ask some of the interns that he's right. Didn't he get in trouble for that?
You know what I mean? Not like disgraced like that. I mean, somebody who doesn't, make trades anymore, but doesn't work for the Athletic, but maybe they're available to talk trades with us. If you guys have any ideas, obviously let us know. This is the Barstool Baseball Show. We'll be back on Friday with some American League talk. Obviously Mondays with the Power Rankings. Can't wait to do that show again. Chris, it's been a delight. I mean that.
Enjoy Omaha, my friend. I will see you soon.
Amen, brother. Okay, guys. I do so bad with this. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
There you go.